I want to stay and have your baby," she said. And rancher broke tradition vertical bar. The sun was beginning to dip behind the distant hills as the rancher worked on his land. Impressive. His name was Sam, and for as long as he could remember, the land had been his only companion. He had been raised on the ranch, taught by his father and grandfather that a man's life was measured by his work. There was no room for anything else, no distractions, no unnecessary feelings, just the constant rhythm of ranch life. Sam had learned early on that love was something distant, something that didn't belong in the world of cattle and fences. He had grown accustomed to the solitude, the endless miles of open land, and the sound of hooves against dirt. For Sam, there was comfort in the quiet. The long, solitary hours spent with the horses, mending fences, and tending to the fields gave him a sense of purpose. But in those rare moments when the work slowed, when the sun was setting and the day's tasks were nearly done, a feeling of emptiness sometimes crept in. Rasp. Still, he pushed it away. There was no time for that. Brask. His family had always believed in hard work, and he had inherited their steadfast dedication. His father, now gone, had always said, "This land is all you need, boy. It'll never leave you." But then came the day when everything changed.
Sam had been working on the east side of the ranch, repairing a broken fence, when he heard the sound of wheels crunching over gravel.
It wasn't unusual for people to pass by. Most were headed to town or stopping for supplies. But this was different. The vehicle slowed as it neared his ranch, and Sam, curious but not concerned, wiped his brow and leaned against the fence post, watching it approach. The truck came to a stop in front of the house, dust swirling around its tires as it idled in the warm evening air. A woman stepped out of the driver's side, and Sam straightened up, wondering what was going on. Bear. She wasn't what he expected. There was something about her that seemed out of place. Her clothes were worn, but not in the way of someone who worked the land. She looked like she had been on a long journey, tired but determined. Her eyes, however, were what caught his attention. They were a deep, dark brown, and there was something in them that told Sam she had seen much of the world, perhaps more than he had. She stood there for a moment, surveying the ranch with a quiet intensity before she approached him. "Excuse me," she said, her voice gentle but firm. "I'm looking for a place to stay. I've been traveling for a while, and I could use some rest." Sam, taken off guard by the sudden request, didn't know how to respond. He wasn't used to strangers showing up unannounced. His ranch was secluded, far from town, and he wasn't sure why she would stop here. Still, something in her voice made him hesitate.
There was no malice, no trickery in her words. Just a simple request.
Breath. "I'm sorry, ma'am," he said, clearing his throat, "but we don't get many visitors out here." "What brings you this way?" The woman smiled softly, her exhaustion evident in the way she stood.
"I'm just passing through, looking for some work, and I thought I might find a place to rest for a night."
Parishioness. "I'll help out with whatever needs doing. I just need to sleep." Sam studied her for a moment, uncertain. He had never been one to entertain company, especially not someone he didn't know. His father had always taught him to keep to himself and trust no one. Yet, as he looked at her, standing there, worn but not defeated, he felt a stirring of compassion he didn't understand. It wasn't his usual reaction, but it was there, like a gentle pull in his chest.
"All right," he finally said, pushing his thoughts aside.
"You can stay for the night. There's an old cabin near the barn. It's nothing fancy, but it'll keep you out of the wind." The woman's face lit up with gratitude.
"Thank you, I really appreciate it. I won't be a burden, I promise."
I just need to rest for a bit." Without another word, she turned toward the cabin, leaving Sam standing by the fence, watching her disappear into the fading light. He couldn't quite shake the feeling that something had shifted. The quiet of the ranch seemed to hang in the air, heavier somehow, as if waiting for something to change. Later that evening, Sam sat on his porch, a cup of coffee in hand, staring out at the land. The ranch had always been his refuge, his father's legacy, and the only life he knew. But now, with the woman in the cabin, something felt different. He wasn't sure what it was, but he couldn't shake the thought that this might be the beginning of something new. The sound of footsteps interrupted his thoughts, and he turned to see her approaching. She was wearing a simple faded dress, her hair pulled back in a loose braid, but she walked with a grace that Sam didn't expect, confident, yet somehow fragile at the same time. She stopped a few feet away from him, her hands resting at her sides. "Brace." "Mind if I sit?" she asked, her voice soft but sure. Sam nodded, gesturing to the chair next to him. Breath. "Not at all. I was just thinking." The woman sat down, looking out at the open land, her gaze distant. Burst. "I have always wanted a place like this," she said after a moment. "A place where everything feels simple and real." Sam raised an eyebrow. "You don't find it complicated?" She shook her head. "No." Peace in it, in the quiet, in the space between the work. Breaths. Sam looked at her, his curiosity piqued. "You've been traveling alone?" She nodded, her eyes meeting his for the first time. "For a while now, I've had to leave a lot behind." The words hung in the air, unspoken but understood. Sam knew she wasn't just talking about physical things. There was more to her story, more behind those dark eyes. But he didn't press her for details. He didn't need to. The silence between them was comfortable, a rare moment of connection that Sam had never felt before. As the night deepened, the air cooled, and the stars began to twinkle overhead. Sam felt a strange sense of calm settle over him. The world around him seemed to slow down, and for the first time in a long while he didn't feel the weight of his responsibilities as heavily.
He didn't know this woman, didn't know her past or her reasons for being here, but in that moment, she didn't seem like a stranger.
First, she seemed right, like someone who understood. The quiet was interrupted by a sudden rustle of leaves, and Sam stood up, stretching his legs. "I'll get back to work tomorrow." "Bus." "You're welcome to stay here for as long as you need. But if you're looking to work, there's plenty to do around the place." She smiled again, and Sam saw something in her that made him feel like maybe, just maybe, things were about to change.
"I'd like that," she said quietly.
And just like that, the world seemed to shift. The ranch, once so familiar to him, felt different now, as if it were a place on the brink of something new, something unexpected. But he felt a spark of curiosity, and for the first time in his life, he didn't mind the uncertainty. The next morning, Sam woke up early, as he always did before the sun rose over the horizon. His routine had never changed, and the tasks on the ranch were always waiting for him. He glanced toward the cabin where the woman, whose name he still hadn't asked, was staying. There was something about her that lingered in his mind. The way she had looked at him the night before, the way her words had seemed to hold weight, even though she hadn't said much. Bill.
It was strange how little things about her had already begun to affect him.
Vibration. He shook his head, trying to focus on the work at hand.
There was no time for distractions.
But as he went about his morning chores, feeding the animals, checking the fences, he couldn't help but glance over toward the cabin now and then. It wasn't like Sam to be distracted, but something felt different. Around mid-morning, Sam was out in the field mending a broken fence post when he saw the woman approaching. She had on her work boots and a thick jacket, her hair tied back in a neat ponytail. She walked with purpose, but there was still a softness about her, a gentleness that was hard to ignore.
Sam watched her as she drew closer, her eyes scanning the land, taking it in as if it were her own.
"You're up early," he called out, surprised by the softness in his own voice. He hadn't meant to sound welcoming. After all, this was his ranch, his routine. But something in her presence made him feel at ease. Narration. "I couldn't sleep much," she replied, her voice calm but weary. "I'm not used to such quiet." "I've been on the road for a long time. Thought I might lend a hand with whatever you're working on." Sam stopped what he was doing and gave her a long look. The ranch was secluded, far from the noise of towns and busy streets. It was a kind of quiet that settled into your bones, and for someone like her who had been traveling, it must have felt strange. "I'm working on the fence over here. You can help if you like," Sam said, his voice gruff, but not unkind. It wasn't like him to ask for help, but something about her made him feel like he wasn't quite alone, even though the task was his responsibility. She nodded, and within moments she was beside him, pulling on the work gloves he had left out for her. For the next few hours they worked together. It wasn't the first time Sam had worked with someone, but there was something different about this woman. She worked with a kind of quiet determination, her hands sure and steady as she helped him lift the heavy posts, hammer in nails, and straighten the fence. They spoke little, but the silence between them was comfortable, neither of them feeling the need to fill it with words. As the day wore on, Sam began to notice little things. How she would stop for a moment to wipe the sweat from her brow. How she would smile when she caught him looking at her. How her movements were fluid and graceful, despite the hard work. It was clear that she wasn't afraid of getting her hands dirty, and that impressed him. Most people, especially women, weren't used to this kind of work. But she seemed at home here, as if the ranch had already become a part of her. "Thank you for helping out," Sam said, breaking the silence as they took a break in the shade of the old oak tree near the barn. He wiped his hands on his jeans, suddenly feeling awkward. "I'm not used to company, but I appreciate it." She sat down on the ground beside him, her back resting against the tree.
"I don't mind," she said softly. "It feels good to work again."
"Haven't had the chance in a long time." She paused, her gaze distant. "I used to work on a farm when I was younger. My family owned a small place, but we lost it a few years ago. It's been hard to find a place that feels like home again." Sam didn't know what to say to that. He had never been good at comforting people, never been good at handling emotions that weren't his own. But there was something in her words that tugged at him. The way she spoke about losing her home, the way she seemed to carry the weight of that loss. It reminded him of how he had felt when his father had passed away. The ranch had been his father's dream, and Sam had always thought it would be his too. He had never questioned it, but hearing her speak, he wondered if maybe there was more to life than just holding on to what had always been. "I'm sorry," Sam finally said, his voice soft. "I didn't know." The woman smiled faintly, but there was a sadness in her eyes.
It's all right. It was a long time ago.
"I've learned to move on. It's just, sometimes it catches up to you when you least expect it." She looked at him then, her eyes meeting his in a way that made Sam feel like she could see right through him. But I think being here helps. The land, the space, it feels like something I can hold on to."
Sam nodded, but the words didn't seem to come.
He didn't know how to explain the bond he had with the land, the deep connection that ran through him, passed down from generations. He had always thought that he was just doing what had been expected of him.
But here, with her, he found himself wondering if maybe the land wasn't all that he needed. Maybe there was more. The rest of the day passed by in a blur of work and silence. They finished repairing the fence and even took a walk around the ranch, with Sam showing her where the cattle grazed and where he had planted the crops. But it was a simple life, one that didn't ask for much, but it was a life that had sustained him. And now, there was someone else here. A stranger, yes, but someone who seemed to understand. Breath. As the sun set and the sky turned a deep orange, Sam found himself sitting on the porch of the cabin watching the stars begin to appear one by one. He had always been a man of routine, a man who believed in hard work and solitude. But now, with the woman nearby, it felt like something was changing.
It wasn't just the ranch that was changing. It was him, too.
Desperate. He didn't know what it meant or where it would lead, but he couldn't deny that something had shifted. The woman appeared beside him, standing in silence for a moment before she spoke. Breaths.
I've been thinking,
She began, her voice quiet.
I know I don't belong here.
Bass. Not really. But, Ration. I don't know where else to go. Sam looked at her, the weight of her words settling over him. He hadn't expected this, hadn't expected her to say anything like that. He had always kept to himself, kept his distance from others. But with her, it felt like the distance was starting to shrink. He couldn't explain it, but he felt the pull to offer more than just a place to stay.
You're welcome to stay as long as you need, Sam said, his voice low but sincere. I don't mind the company. She smiled, and for a brief moment, Sam felt the silence between them change.
It wasn't uncomfortable, it was just different. As the stars sparkled above, Sam wondered what would happen next, unsure of where this connection would lead, but not afraid to find out. The days after their conversation by the oak tree passed by quickly, and before Sam knew it, a week had already gone by. Sam wasn't sure when it had happened, but something had shifted between him and the woman, whose name he had learned was Clara. Brett. She had become a regular part of his daily routine, helping with the chores around the ranch and offering a quiet, steady presence that he hadn't realized he needed. Her hands were always busy, fixing fences, feeding the animals, and even managing the small vegetable garden that Sam hadn't bothered with for years. She seemed to know just what to do without needing to be told, and Sam found himself admiring the way she worked. There was something calming about her, something that made everything around them feel more alive, even though their surroundings had always been still and quiet. On the third day, Sam found himself sitting on the porch watching Clara work in the garden. She had a natural ease about her, moving gracefully between rows of vegetables, pulling weeds, and checking on the plants as if she'd been doing it all her life. She hummed softly to herself, a tune Sam didn't recognize, but it made the quiet air seem less empty. Sam wasn't used to this kind of peace. His life had been full of hard work and long hours, and while he had always appreciated the silence of the land, this new kind of quiet felt different. It was as though it held the promise of something more. As the sun began to set, Clara walked toward the porch, wiping her hands on her apron. She looked tired but content, and there was a lightness in her eyes that Sam hadn't seen before. He stood up to greet her, offering a small nod of acknowledgement. Clara smiled and took a seat next to him on the porch steps, resting her hands on her knees. Perception. "Another long day," she said, letting out a small sigh. "But I think we made good progress." Sam nodded.
You've been doing a lot of good work around here. I don't know what I would have done without you.
He wasn't sure why he said it, but the words seemed to come naturally. He was used to doing everything himself, always working alone. But now, with Clara here, it was different. There was no longer any need to shoulder the weight of everything by himself. The ranch seemed to be thriving in a way it hadn't in years. Clara smiled softly, brushing a loose strand of hair from her face. Breath.
"I'm just glad I can help," she said. "It feels good to be doing something real, something that matters."
I've been traveling for so long, never really settling anywhere. This place feels different. It feels like it could be home. The last word hung in the air, and Sam felt a strange tug in his chest.
Home. The idea of home had always seemed distant to him.
His life had been shaped by the idea of responsibility, of carrying on his family's legacy. But home had never really felt like something he could truly claim. Not until now. But Clara's words made him realize that maybe he had been missing something all along. Maybe this land wasn't just about work and duty. Maybe it was about more than just living here. It was about belonging. As the evening sky deepened into a rich purple, the sounds of the ranch grew quieter, the gentle hum of the land settling into the night. Sam sat down next to Clara on the porch, both of them watching the stars begin to appear in the sky. "Ah!" Clara, usually so full of energy, seemed to relax into the moment. Leaning back against the old wooden railing, there was a peacefulness in the air that Sam had never experienced before. He couldn't explain it, but he didn't need to. Clara looked over at him, her eyes soft in the dim light.
"You know, I've been thinking," she began slowly. "I don't have a lot of plans anymore."
"I don't know what's ahead for me. But I do know that being here, with you, feels like it's part of something. I've never had that feeling before." Sam's heart skipped a beat. He had always thought of his life as set in stone, his path clear and unchanging. He'd never expected to feel the way he did now, with Clara sitting beside him, sharing her thoughts so openly. He wasn't sure how to respond, so he simply nodded, unsure of how to put his own feelings into words.
"I'm not used to this," he admitted, his voice quiet.
Having someone around, I mean. "It feels good. I didn't know I needed this."
"I didn't know I could."
Clara smiled, the warmth of her expression making Sam's chest feel fuller. She didn't say anything more, but her gaze met his in a way that made the words feel unnecessary. They both sat there in silence, the sounds of crickets and the rustling wind filling the space between them. The world around them seemed to fade away, leaving just the two of them in that quiet moment, where everything felt a little bit softer, a little bit more real.
As the days turned into weeks, Sam found himself growing more and more comfortable with Clara's presence.
Great. They continued to work side by side, repairing fences, tending to the animals, and fixing up the old barn that had been slowly falling apart for years. But now there was a sense of ease in the work.
It wasn't just the tasks that mattered. It was the fact that they were doing them together. Sam had always believed that life was about what you could accomplish on your own.
But now he saw that there was something to be said for sharing those moments with someone else, for having someone to lean on, even if it was just for a little while. One afternoon, as they worked together in the barn, Sam caught a glimpse of Clara as she carried a bundle of hay into the loft. She was laughing, a sound that had become more frequent lately, and Sam felt a warmth spread through him. He had always been a man of few words, content with the quiet of his own company. But with Clara, there was something about the way she made everything seem lighter, even the hardest tasks. Bah! She made him smile without even trying.
"Do you ever think about the future?" Clara asked suddenly as she placed the hay down and turned to face him.
"About what you want, where you see yourself going?" Sam paused, taken aback by the question. He had always lived in the present, never much thought about what came next. But now, with Clara's question hanging in the air, he found himself wondering. He had never thought about the future in the way she meant.
He had always been focused on keeping the ranch running, on surviving from day to day, but now he found himself thinking about something more.
He thought about the land, of course, but he also thought about Clara, and how she had slowly become a part of his life in ways he hadn't expected.
I don't know,
Sam admitted, his voice quiet. I've always just done what I had to do. I never really thought about what comes after. But maybe it's time to think about it. Clara's smile was gentle, and her eyes sparkled with something that made Sam's heart skip a beat. You don't have to figure it all out right away, she said softly. But just know that whatever happens, you don't have to face it alone. The words sank deep into Sam's heart, and for the first time in a long while he felt the weight of the future lift off his shoulders. He didn't know what the future held, but with Clara by his side, he knew that he didn't have to face it alone. And that was more than enough for now. It was a crisp morning when Sam felt the weight of his decision. The ranch had always been a part of him, a part of his family's legacy. But Clara had brought something into his life that he hadn't even realized was missing. Hope, connection, and the possibility of something more. As they spent more time together, he found that his thoughts, once so focused on work, began to wander. But he was thinking about what Clara had said the night she arrived, the words she spoke about home, about staying. Sam had always thought that the ranch was where his roots lay. He never imagined his life could change so dramatically. Yet, the more time he spent with Clara, the more he realized that his heart was telling him something different. Breaths. Sam was out in the barn early that day, working alone. The sun was just rising, casting a soft golden light over the fields. The day was beginning, but the quiet of the morning felt heavy. His hands worked mechanically, fixing a section of the roof that had been damaged in the last storm. He had been meaning to get to it, but with all the other tasks piling up, it had slipped through the cracks. He was focused on his work when Clara appeared in the doorway of the barn. She had her sleeves rolled up, her hair tied back, and her boots caked with the familiar dust of the ranch. She had a look on her face that Sam recognized, a look of determination mixed with quiet understanding. "I thought I'd help you out today," she said, her voice light but firm. She was carrying a bundle of tools in her hands, ready to get started. Sam paused, wiping his brow at the back of his hand. He hadn't expected her to come out here to help with this particular job. "It's a bit heavy work for you," he said, not wanting to push her into anything too difficult. But Clara simply shook her head, a smile playing at the corner of her lips.
I'm stronger than I look, she said. Besides, I've been around farms long enough to know how to handle myself.
Press. I'm not afraid of a little work. Sam couldn't help but laugh softly. There was something about her confidence, the way she took on everything so easily, that made him feel lighter. He had always carried the weight of the ranch by himself, never truly letting anyone in. But with Clara, everything felt more balanced. There was no longer the heavy burden of isolation that had defined his life for so long. They spent the rest of the morning working side by side, fixing the roof and repairing the fence that had been knocked loose in the storm. There was something strangely comforting about working with Clara. They didn't need to speak much. Their actions spoke for them. The way she worked with ease, the way her hands moved with purpose, made Sam feel like he was seeing the ranch in a new light. It wasn't just a place of work anymore. It was a place of possibility.
Around midday, they took a break sitting on the porch with their lunch.
Breathing. The sun was high in the sky, warming the air, and the sounds of the ranch seemed to come alive. The low hum of the animals, the rustle of the wind through the trees. Sam looked out at the land, the fields stretching out before him, and for the first time he didn't feel the weight of responsibility pressing down on him. It wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about something more. Clara sat beside him, her feet up on the porch, relaxed but still alert. She was always so present, so engaged with everything around her. Sam had never met anyone like her. The way she carried herself with such quiet strength, the way she had become a part of this ranch, felt like a miracle. She was more than just a visitor here. She was becoming part of the land itself. "Sam," Clara said, breaking the silence between them. Her voice was soft, but there was a seriousness in it.
"I've been thinking a lot lately about what comes next." Sam turned to her, his eyes meeting hers.
He had known that the question would come sooner or later. What would happen after everything settled down? Would she stay, or would she leave, like so many others before her? He wasn't sure if he was ready to face that question, but he knew it was inevitable. "I'm not sure what comes next either," Sam admitted. "But I do know that I've never felt more at peace than I do right here, with you. But, for the first time, I'm not afraid of it." Clara's smile was soft, her eyes full of understanding.
"I'm not afraid either," she said, her words steady and sure. "Whatever happens, I'll be here."
"For as long as I can." For the first time in a long time, Sam allowed himself to believe in something. He had always thought of his future in terms of the land, of his duty to carry on his family's legacy. But now, with Clara by his side, he began to see that there was more to life than tradition and duty. There was love, there was possibility, and there was the future they could build together. That night, as they sat around a campfire outside, the flames crackling in the cool evening air, Sam felt the weight of his past begin to lift. Breath. He had always carried the expectations of his family and the ranch like a heavy cloak. But now it seemed lighter. Clara's presence had shifted something inside him, Brett. She had shown him that there was more to life than just survival, and that it was okay to let go of the past and embrace something new. "You know," Sam said, looking up at the stars, "I've always thought this land was all I needed, that it was enough to make me happy. But I realize now that I've been holding on to it too tightly. I've been so focused on what I thought I was supposed to do that I never stopped to think about what I wanted." Clara was quiet for a moment, her gaze on the fire as it danced in the dark. Then she spoke softly.
"What do you want, Sam?" The question caught him off guard, but it wasn't the first time Clara had asked him something that made him think.
For so long he had believed his future was mapped out for him, that he had no choice but to follow the path that had been set before him. But now, sitting beside her, surrounded by the quiet of the ranch and the promise of something new, Sam realized that he had a choice. "I want a future that's mine," Sam said, his voice firm but filled with hope. "I want to build something with you. Something real." Clara's smile was all he needed. It wasn't a promise or a guarantee, but it was enough. In that moment, Sam knew that he wasn't alone anymore. They had something together, something that couldn't be taken away. They had the land, they had the ranch, and most importantly, they had each other. As the night wore on and the fire slowly burned down to embers, Sam and Clara sat in comfortable silence, their hearts connected in a way neither of them had ever expected. The future was still uncertain, but for the first time in his life, Sam wasn't afraid of it. Breaths. Whatever came next, he would face it with Clara by his side, and together they would build a life that was theirs. The next few weeks seemed to fly by for Sam and Clara. They worked together side by side on the ranch, and the more they shared the tasks, the more they began to share their lives. It was no longer just about the land, the animals, or the work. It was about the small moments, the quiet exchanges, and the understanding that had grown between them. Sam had never been one for deep conversations, but with Clara, the silence was comfortable, and the words they did speak seemed to carry more meaning. One evening, as they sat on the porch after a long day, watching the sky turn orange and pink as the sun set, Sam felt a sense of peace that he had never known before. The ranch was no longer just a place of solitude. It had become a home, not just because of the land, but because of Clara. She had brought something into his life that he had never thought possible: companionship, understanding, and a sense of purpose beyond work. "I've been thinking," Sam said quietly, his voice soft as he broke the silence between them. Clara looked over at him, her eyes soft and open, always ready to listen. Breaths. "What's on your mind?" she asked, her voice full of warmth. Sam hesitated for a moment, unsure of how to put his feelings into words. He had spent so many years alone, holding everything inside, and now, with Clara, he wasn't sure how to express the thoughts that had been swirling in his mind.
"I've always believed that the ranch was all I needed," he began.
Breaths. "That this place was enough. But now, with you here, I see that there's more."
"I've been thinking a lot about the future. About us."
Phew. Clara sat up a little straighter, her attention fully on him. She didn't interrupt, just waited for him to continue, her expression one of quiet understanding. Breath. "I never imagined that I would feel this way about someone," Sam said, his voice steady but full of emotion. "I never thought I would want anything more than the ranch, but now I can't imagine my life without you in it." Clara smiled, a small, gentle smile that made Sam's heart swell. She reached over and placed her hand on his. A simple gesture, but it meant more than words could say.
"You've already given me more than I ever expected," Clara said softly. "When I first came here, I didn't know what I was looking for."
"I just knew I needed a place to stay. But I found something much more than that.
I found a life with you." Sam's heart skipped a beat at her words. He had never expected this, never thought he would feel so deeply for someone. But here, with Clara, everything felt different. She had opened his eyes to a world that was bigger than just the land and the work. She had shown him that life could be about more than just surviving. Bah. As they sat together on the porch watching the stars begin to twinkle in the sky, Sam felt a sense of certainty that he hadn't known before. He had spent so many years feeling like his life was set in stone, like he had no control over what came next. But now he realized that he did have a choice. He could choose the path he wanted to take, and for the first time in his life, he was ready to make that choice. "I want to build a future with you," Sam said, his voice firm with conviction. "Not just here on the ranch, but together, whatever comes next. I want to make this work." Clara's eyes softened, and she squeezed his hand. "I want that too, Sam. I'm not going anywhere. I want to stay here with you, and whatever the future holds, I want to face it together." Sam smiled, the weight in his chest lifting. For the first time in his life, he didn't feel alone. He had someone by his side who understood him, who cared for him, and who wanted the same things he did.
It wasn't just about the ranch anymore.
It was about their life together. The next few months brought new challenges, but with each challenge came new opportunities. They worked hard on the ranch, making improvements, fixing up the house, and planting new crops. The land that had once seemed so solitary and endless now felt like a shared space, a place they were both building together. One day, as they were out in the fields planting seeds for the next season's crops, Sam paused to look at Clara. She was kneeling in the dirt, her hands covered in soil as she worked the ground. She was focused, determined, but there was also a sense of peace about her, a quiet contentment that Sam had come to recognize in her. It was the same feeling that filled him every time he looked at her, every time they shared a quiet moment together. "Clara," he said, his voice breaking through the rhythm of their work, "I've been thinking." She looked up at him, her face covered in the lightest layer of dirt, but her smile was bright and full of warmth. "What's on your mind?" she asked. Sam took a deep breath. "I know we've only been together for a little while, but I can't imagine my life without you. I want to ask you something important."
I want you to stay with me, not just for now, but for the rest of our lives. I want to build a future with you, right here on this land, and I want to make this place our home, together.
Clara's expression softened, and for a moment she said nothing. She simply stood up, walked over to him, and kissed him softly on the cheek. It wasn't a grand gesture, but it spoke volumes. Sam felt a warmth in his chest, a quiet joy that filled him completely. "I'm already here, Sam," she said, her voice steady and full of love. "I'm here with you, and I'll stay with you for as long as you'll have me." Sam smiled, feeling as if a weight had been lifted from his shoulders. For the first time in his life, he wasn't holding on to the past. He wasn't living in the shadow of what was expected of him. He was building something new, something that was his, something that he and Clara could share. It was no longer just about the ranch or the land. It was about their life together, and that was all that mattered. As the sun began to set, casting a golden glow over the land, Sam took Clara's hand and led her back toward the house. Together they walked through the fields side by side, knowing that no matter what the future held, they would face it together. They had found something in each other that was worth holding on to, something that made the challenges of life feel smaller, easier to bear. The future was uncertain, as it always was, but with Clara by his side, Sam knew one thing for sure: he was no longer alone. And that was more than enough.